Yo, the Skyrider Greatsword is kind of a sleeper pick here.
Gimme chance. Gimme chance.
Hey guys, and what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today, a little bit more Eula content before she finally releases, and I'm gonna go over the calcs I did to help me decide whether or not to run attack percent goblet or physical damage bonus. Now, before I start, this video isn't meant to tell you how to build your Eula, but just to show the math because I was curious how it affected her damage output. So in today's video, I'm only going to be looking at 3 weapons: the Prototype Archaic, Snowtombed Starsilver, and the Skyrider Greatsword. If you're coming from my last Snowtombed video, I mentioned that that weapon beat the Archaic with the calcs that I did, but I did fail to include the proc damage or the crush passive skill from the Archaic. Now, I'm not trying to make any excuses for myself because that was definitely a mistake, but the point of that video was to compare the Snowtombed Starsilver to her stronger weapons and see how it competed with those. I would hope that if you saw a weapon that I didn't really talk about that performed similarly, that I don't need to spell everything out and mention everything. I would hope that you can make your own conclusions and factor in the percent scaling from the crush passive damage and make estimations yourself. I also want my videos to generate discussion and questions because I'm just one guy. I can't possibly think of everything and mention every single detail and variable. I also want those videos to generate new perspectives and ideas, and as I read through the comments on my videos, there's definitely a whole lot of that. So thanks for all the comments. Now on to the actual video. I needed to go and verify this for myself, but the crush passive from the Prototype Archaic behaves exactly the same way as the icicle damage from the Snowtombed Starsilver, in that it's considered physical damage, so physical debuffs like superconduct and physical buffs all affect the damage. And the main reason why I'm making this video is to answer why we would want to even replace our physical damage bonus goblet with an attack percent goblet. And there is a very simple reason for this, and that's because with the calculations that I've been doing, I am investing a whole lot into physical damage bonus and debuffs from the 4-piece Pale Flame set, Xinyan, and the Snowtombed main stat. So that's 3 sources of physical damage bonus. So theoretically, in order to balance out the damage formula, it might be a good idea to invest a little bit more into attack percent. But what exactly is the damage formula? The damage formula is actually pretty basic at a high level, and this is what it looks like. To break this down and to just put this in as simplest terms that I can put it in, it's basically like a cube. There are 3 main parts to the damage formula, so you want to balance each part as much as possible with the resources that you have. So let's say, for example, we have a total of 12 resources to use. What is the best way to divvy up these 12 resources to get the most damage? So there's 2 ways to look at this. We can go with a 4x4x4, or we could go with a 6x4x2. And if you multiply these different combinations of numbers, you're not going to get the same number. The 4-4-4 build is going to end up being more damage than the 6-4-2 build. Hopefully that simple example makes sense, but this is kind of the theoretical reason why we might want to go into attack percent, and that's why we're going to dive into these calculations and see if that actually proves to be true with this build. Alright, and now before we jump into it, I have to go over the parameters for my calculations, and it's the same for every single one of my videos, usually the same for every single one of my videos, so go ahead and check the timestamps if you want to skip this section. So my calculations are done with a level 80 Eula, talent level 8, with an attack percent sans piece, which is giving us 46.6% attack percent. She is going to be using a crit rate circlet, and she has conservative substats: 3 rolls into attack percent, and 3 rolls into crit damage percent at its highest tier roll. So that's going to be 5.8 times 3 and 7.8 times 3. The variable in these calculations is going to be the goblet, where we either swap it out for attack percent or physical damage bonus. I am also using Zhongli, Xinyan, and Lisa to increase our damage even further, with physical res down and physical damage buffs. Now don't get confused here. Just because I'm using these in my calcs, it doesn't mean that this is the best way to go. On paper it might look good, but maybe not in practice. this. I'm probably not even going to be using this comp as my Lisa isn't really invested into. And perhaps maybe even Superconduct is overkill? Who knows? I haven't done a comparison between using Superconduct and say using Pyro Resonance, for example, replacing that Electro character slot with another Pyro character slot. I hope that you guys are getting the idea. There's a whole lot of variables and comparisons that you can do, and I can't possibly cover all of them. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into the first set of charts and calculations. So first off, here is the table of all of the damage that I calculated with these weapons. But as always, I convert this into charts and graphs so we can digest the information a little bit easier. And the results are pretty interesting because you honestly can't go wrong with any weapon option here. From the setup that I'm using, yes, some weapons will slightly edge out over others, but they're honestly so close to each other. And the main point of this video was to figure out whether we should run attack percent or damage bonus, and these graphs are also telling us whether or not we should replace or swap out our goblet. So if we take a look at this first graph, the Snowtombed Starsilver with Physical Damage Goblet has the highest total damage of all of the weapons. But honestly, among all of the physical damage percent builds, they are so close in damage that you're barely going to notice anything. And also note that the Snowtombed has both icicle damage motion values, but you'll only be hitting one of those per 10 seconds, and with the Archaic, it'll be every 15 seconds. So if you just included one icicle damage over the other, the Prototype Archaic and the Snowtombed Starsilver are performing nearly exactly the same. The Archaic will slightly edge out if you hit those low icicle damage numbers, however. Now, I want to turn your attention to the 3-star Skyrider Greatsword though, because it's actually doing pretty well compared to our 4-star options. Without any passive physical damage procs, it competes super well when you have all 4 stacks at Refinement 5. So if you've got absolutely no other options, the Skyrider is actually pretty good. But obviously, when we look at it with no stacks, it's very much at the bottom of the list. And you will, of course, always be at 0 stacks at some point in your fights, because at the start of a combo or off of a character switch, you're gonna have 0 stacks. Stacks also last only 6 seconds, so it's definitely gonna go away by the time you've rotated through all of your other characters. Again, for a 3-star weapon, not bad at all. For my next graph, I decided to remove the elemental burst damage. And here, the Snowtombed edges out a little bit more. Even with the attack percent goblet setup, it is slightly beating the Archaic with physical damage percent. But again, remember that this includes both icicle damage values, so really, they're almost basically the same, or the Archaic's going to beat it if you hit low icicle damage numbers. Pretty much the same story we were seeing with our first graph. If we look at the Skyrider Greatsword, however, it looks like it's getting worse. So over longer periods of time, where you can't execute your burst as often, the Skyrider is going to begin to fall off. For this last and final chart, I removed the elemental burst and the passive crush damage and icicle damage. This is gonna let me break down the different damage for each part of our kit a little bit easier, and the effects of switching out your goblet. And very surprisingly, the Skyrider Greatsword with max stacks hits the highest damage among our 4-star weapons. Again, of course, this is without any of the passive damage procs, but I was actually very surprised by this. If we take a look at the Prototype and the Snowtombed though, they perform basically exactly the same without their passive damage procs. You can also clearly see that the total damage output lowers when we swap out our physical damage percent with an attack percent goblet. And the reason why it's lower is because our physical damage is just that much stronger and has higher motion values or percent scaling. The effects of changing the goblet to attack percent will increase our cryo damage from our skills, but it's not enough of an increase to justify the switch. Look at the red and yellow sections here. You can see that our cryo damage increases with attack percent, but in exchange, our normal attack combos get significantly weaker, making your overall damage output less. So with the calculations that I did here, running physical damage bonus seems to be the best choice, even though we went all in on physical damage bonuses and debuffs. But this is not to say that attack percent is bad, because it's certainly not. If you can't get your hands on a good physical damage goblet, you're not really missing out on too much. The damage difference here is less than 10%. And I'm not going all in and showing you the overall percent damage difference between everything, because these weapons are so close. I think that it's not really worth it to go through all of that. At the end of the day, it's not any more than 15%, so I'm just going to skip the overall percentage comparison. But this is the conclusion that I wound up with, that with my physical setup, it's not worth it to run attack percent for our goblet, even though in theory, it sounded like it might have been a good idea. The damage that we are sacrificing on our normal attacks just isn't worth the higher damage numbers that we get on our cryo damage. Now, there is a situation where I can see this being worth it, and that's if it ends up being that Eula's attack speed is a little bit too slow, and that we don't actually execute her full attack string by the time we're off cooldown on our elemental skills. But anyway, if it were me, I would stick to physical damage goblet, as long as, of course, you have a decent one laying around. And so that's pretty much all that I have for you guys in this video, and I hope this helped you guys out in deciding how to build your Eulas. And if you watched the entire video and made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And you guys already know what to do. Hit the like button if you really want to, and if you'd like to support me as a creator, and maybe even subscribe to the channel. If you've got a Twitter, go ahead and follow me there. And if you're a regular on Twitch, I sometimes stream on Twitch on most Tuesdays and Thursdays. All of the links are in the description below. And until next time, guys, I will see you guys later.